The silence that fell over the room wasn't empty. It was heavy, thick with the kind of anticipation that only comes once in a generation. She stood in the center of the spotlight, a slender figure in a gown that seemed to weigh more than she did. Before a single note was sung, you could feel it, the electricity, the impending rupture of the atmosphere. She closed her eyes, not to block out the world, but to find a place inside where the pain didn't exist, only the sound. When she opened her mouth, it wasn't just a song, it was a testament. It was the sound of impeccable perfection masking a fragile, trembling heart. For decades, she was the standard, the pinnacle, the voice that every aspiring singer measured themselves against. But behind the sequins and the platinum records, a storm was gathering, fueled by pressure that would crush steel. We watched her soar to the heavens, and then, with a collective gasp of horror, we watched her fall. But why does the brightest flame always seem destined to burn the house down? This isn't just a story about fame or the tragic headlines that followed. It's about the girl named Nippy who got lost in the towering legend of Whitney Houston. Long before the flashbulbs blinded her in Hollywood, Whitney Houston was just Nippy, a skinny girl from Newark, New Jersey, trying to find her footing in a world that demanded loudness. Born in 1963, she didn't just arrive into a family. She was born into a musical dynasty. Her mother was the formidable gospel singer Cissy Houston, her cousin was Dionne Warwick, and her godmother was Aretha Franklin. The air in the Houston household wasn't just oxygen. It was melody, harmony, and rigorous discipline. But talent in the Houston home wasn't treated as a gift. It was treated as a responsibility. Cissy didn't just teach her daughter how to sing. She taught her how to survive a song. In the pews of the New Hope Baptist Church, amidst the swaying choir robes and the heavy scent of incense, young Whitney learned that a voice wasn't just for entertainment, it was for testimony. She learned to project from the gut, to hold a note until it felt like the walls might crumble, and to treat every performance like it was the last prayer she would ever offer. By her late teens, the secret was too big to keep in New Jersey. She was stunning, with a smile that could light up Manhattan, leading her to a brief but successful stint in modeling, one of the first women of color to grace the cover of 17 magazine. Yet, the runway was silent, and her destiny was loud. She spent nights singing background vocals for Chaka Khan and Lou Rawls, standing in the shadows, learning the architecture of a hit record, waiting for the light to shift. That shift happened in 1983 at a nightclub in New York City. The legendary music executive Clive Davis, the head of Arista Records, sat in the audience. He had heard whispers of Cissy's daughter, but nothing could prepare him for the reality. When she took the mic, the clinking of glasses stopped. Davis saw not just a singer, but a generational crossover star, someone who could bridge the gap between soul and pop, between black and white audiences in a way no one had before. He signed her immediately, but he didn't rush her. They spent 2 years crafting a debut that was polished to diamond-hard perfection. When her self-titled debut album dropped in 1985, it wasn't a ripple, it was a tidal wave. Tracks like Saving All My Love For You and How Will I Know didn't just climb the charts, they camped out there. The world saw a young woman who looked like a model and sang like a gospel veteran. Critics whispered that she was too polished, perhaps even packaged too safely for mass consumption. But the public didn't care. They were witnessing the arrival of a vocal athlete. Whitney Houston had officially stepped out of the choir and onto the world stage, unaware that the higher she climbed, the thinner the air would become. By the late 1982, Whitney Houston wasn't just participating in the music industry, she was dictating it. She shattered records held by the Beatles, scoring 7 consecutive #1 hits. But statistics are cold, and Whitney was fire. Her dominance wasn't about charts. It was about a cultural ubiquity that felt inescapable. You couldn't turn on a radio, walk into a mall, or wait in a dentist's office without hearing that crystalline soprano cutting through the noise. She had become America's sweetheart, the prom queen of soul, polished to a shine that dazzled the world. Then came January 1991. The Gulf War had cast a shadow of fear over the nation, and the Super Bowl felt less like a game and more like a nervous distraction. Whitney walked onto the field in Tampa, not in a gown, but in a simple white tracksuit and a headband, looking like she had just jogged in from the street. There was no orchestra on the field, just her and a microphone. When she began the Star-Spangled Banner, she didn't just sing the notes, she liberated them. She slowed the anthem down, turning a military march into a soulful hymn of resilience. For those few minutes, a divided country stood still, united by the sheer, undeniable power of the voice. It remains, to this day, the gold standard of patriotism, but if the Super Bowl made her a national treasure, 1,992 made her an immortal pop icon. She took a gamble on Hollywood with The Bodyguard. Critics sharpened their knives, ready to tear apart the singer turned actress. Instead, she delivered a performance that mirrored her own life, a superstar vulnerable behind the velvet rope. And then there was the soundtrack. When the first few seconds of I Will Always Love You played, the world held its breath. It started with a lonely, a cappella intro, bold, exposed, and haunting. Then came the drum kick, and finally, that explosive key change that challenged the limits of human vocal cords. It wasn't just a cover of a Dolly Parton song, it was a reinvention. The song spent 14 weeks at #1, becoming the anthem for weddings, breakups, and everything in between. At that moment, Whitney Houston was untouchable. She was the most famous woman on the planet, standing at a height so dizzying that few noticed the ground beneath her was beginning to shake. Amidst this blinding success, she made a choice that stunned the tabloids. She married R&B bad boy Bobby Brown. To the public, it was oil and water, the gospel-trained princess, and the street-smart rebel. The media couldn't look away. While the cameras flashed and the awards piled up, Grammys, AMAs, Billboard trophies, a different narrative was being written behind the gates of her mansion. The pressure to maintain the pristine image of Whitney Houston was colliding violently with the reality of Nippy, the woman who just wanted to be free. The cracks were microscopic at first, but under the weight of the world's adoration, they were bound to spread. The descent wasn't a free fall, it was a slow, agonizing slide played out on the nightly news for the world to consume. As the new millennium broke, the polished image of Whitney Houston began to fracture. The rumors of drug addiction moved from whispered gossip in industry hallways to undeniable front-page headlines. She wasn't just late for rehearsals anymore, she was vanishing. The weight dropped from her frame, leaving her gaunt and fragile, a ghost of the vibrant woman who once commanded the Super Bowl. Her marriage to Bobby Brown became the epicenter of the chaos. To the public, it was a spectacle of 911 calls and court appearances, culminating in the reality TV show Being Bobby Brown. The show was intended to humanize them, to show they were just a normal couple, but instead, it stripped away the last layers of her mystique. Fans watched in horror as the elegant diva engaged in erratic arguments, her regal aura replaced by a chaotic, raw vulnerability. It was no longer about the music, it was about the mess. The nadir came in 2002 during an interview with Diane Sawyer. When asked about her alleged drug use, Whitney famously retorted, "Crack is whack." It was meant to be a defense, a reclamation of her pride, but it became a cruel cultural punchline. The world laughed, but they missed the tragedy staring them in the face. A woman screaming for help in a language no one wanted to understand. The drug addiction wasn't a lifestyle choice, it was a coping mechanism for a life lived entirely for others, a numbing agent against the crushing weight of expectation. But the most heartbreaking loss wasn't her reputation, it was her instrument. The velvet voice that had once effortlessly scaled octaves began to fray. At a tribute concert for Michael Jackson, she appeared skeleton thin, her voice hoarse and breaking. The notes she used to hit in her sleep were now out of reach. For a singer whose identity was entirely wrapped up in her vocal perfection, this was a spiritual death. She stood on stages around the world, sweating and straining, trying to summon the magic that had abandoned her. By 2009, she tried to claw her way back. She divorced Bobby Brown, sat down with Oprah to bare her soul, and released I Look to You. The album went to #1, a testament to the public's enduring love, but the tour that followed was painful to watch. Fans walked out, critics were merciless. The spirit was willing, but the vessel was broken. She was fighting a war on two fronts, one against the demons of her past and another against the unforgiving judgment of the present. And as 2012 approached, the silence after the applause grew louder than the ovation itself. To understand Whitney Houston, you have to understand the complicated mirror she held up to America. While the world saw a global pop icon, at home, her identity was a battleground. In the beginning, she was the perfect package, a black woman with a sound that white America felt safe embracing. But this crossover success came with a heavy price tag. In the barber shops and neighborhoods of her youth, whispers grew that she had sold out, that she had polished the soul out of her voice to please the mainstream. The pain of being booed at the 1,989 Soul Train Awards labeled Whitney Houston by her own people left a scar that no number of Grammys could heal. She spent the rest of her life trying to prove she was still Nippy from Newark, a struggle that perhaps drove her closer to the edge. The American media, in turn, feasted on her fall with a voracious appetite. They built her up as a saint, only to relish tearing her down as a sinner. In the 2000s, empathy for drug addiction was non-existent. Instead, her struggle became late-night talk show fodder. The country that had wept during her Super Bowl national anthem was now laughing at her erratic behavior. It was a cruel spectacle, a public shaming that ignored the human being crumbling behind the headlines. Then came the 11th of February 2012. The news broke on the eve of the Grammys. Whitney Houston was found unresponsive in a bathtub at the Beverly Hilton. The shock wave was physical. Suddenly, the joke stopped. The cynics fell silent. From New York to Tokyo, the world collectively gasped, in a cruel twist of irony, as music's biggest stars gathered downstairs to celebrate. The woman who had set the standard lay silent a few floors above. The radio waves, once filled with gossip, were reclaimed by her music. I Will Always Love You returned to the airwaves, but this time, the soaring declaration sounded like a mournful goodbye. The tragedy didn't end with her last breath. In a haunting echo that shook the world, her daughter, Bobby Christina Brown, suffered an eerily similar fate just 3 years later. It felt like a Greek tragedy written in real time, a grim reminder that the demons haunting the Houston Brown legacy were relentless. The world was left with a heavy realization. We had consumed her gift so voraciously that we forgot to protect the giver. Her death forced a global conversation about the pressure of fame and the hidden agony of addiction, leaving a void that no new star could ever fill. So, what is the final measure of a life like hers? Is it the rows of platinum records gathering dust? Or is it the shiver you feel when that drum kick hits and I Will Always Love You? Whitney Houston gave us everything she had, pouring her soul out until there was nothing left to give. She was the architect of the modern pop icon, the standard bearer who proved that a black girl from Jersey could hold the entire world in a single breath. She didn't just set the bar, she was the bar. But her legacy is more than just melody, it is a mirror. She forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about how we treat our idols. We demanded perfection from a human being, and when the cracks appeared, we didn't offer a hand. We offered judgment. Her story isn't just a tragedy of drug addiction. It's a testament to the crushing weight of a gift that was too big for one person to carry alone. She showed us that you can conquer the charts, the movies, and the world, yet still lose the most important battle within yourself. In the end, perhaps the greatest tribute we can offer isn't just listening to the voice, but listening to the silence she left behind. It's a reminder to be kinder, to look past the blinding glimmer of the spotlight and see the fragile person standing in the shadows. Nippy is gone, but the sound she created will never fade. It echoes in every church choir, in every heartbroken teenager's bedroom, and in the soul of anyone who ever dared to dream big. Some stories end without closure, but dignity doesn't need applause. She has finally found the quiet she deserved, far away from the cameras that couldn't capture her soul. If this story brought back a memory of where you were when you first heard her sing, or if it reminds you of someone you've lost to their own battles, write their name below. Let's keep their music playing.